All right, we gonna get into it.
Okay.
We live, we live. Kesha Davis Coleman, we live. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. We live, we live.
All
All
right.
right. So, Kesha, tell us your worst childhood memory.
Okay, so my worst childhood memory, and it's no secret that I led a very abused childhood. I used my life teaching the youth today and helping people to overcome. So my life was filled with a lot of physical and sexual abuse. So I've had a lot of childhood trauma. Um, I think that it's one thing to experience it, but after it's all said and done, dealing with it is even more traumatic. In this society today, we need to normalize talking about it, and not only talking about it, but getting the help that we need for our children. We had talked about it earlier, T, and I think that we should normalize not telling our girls to stay away from Uncle Jethro and stop inviting Uncle Jethro to the cookout when we know he's the problem. You know, Sexual abuse is probably one of the ones that scars you mentally, physically, and emotionally. Um, when I hear people talk about a promiscuous girl, I don't judge her. I want to know what happened to that girl to make her like that. And it's always an exception to the rule, but 9 times out of 10 is something that we need to be looking deeper into to find out not only how we can help this child, but to get her to know that she is whole still. She's not, nothing's wrong with her. It wasn't her. She's not the problem. And this affects not only your childhood, but your teenage years, your adulthood, if you don't get the help for it that you need. The Black community is faced with a lot of trauma. And a lot of people say, why Black history? Why are we still doing that? Slavery was 400 years ago. Well, let me tell you why. It's because the trauma that our ancestors were put through, we still have the effects of it today. For example, if you have a man who was a king in this country, he's raped, he's beaten, he's forced to watch his wife being raped and beaten. Then they take his children and they send them away for him never to see them again. When slavery is over, did they offer him therapy? No. They said, okay, go on about your life. We're done. Where does he go from there? So, in turn, nobody talks about it. It's just deep down. But how that man raises his family and his children with that trauma is going to pass down from generation to generation to generation. And then we have a generation of people who don't know why this is happening, but they pass it on anyway. So it's time to start breaking generational curses. It's time to talk about it, whether you feel that it's going to be shameful to you, because let's face it, it's not about you. My children were raised on survival mode because I was afraid of the love mode. I didn't know good touch, bad touch, so I practiced no touch. There was no hugging, kissing. I love you seemed forced. And even with my siblings, we talked about this the other day. We very rarely say I love you to each other. And when we do, we make a joke of it. It's funny. We laugh. Oh, go ahead. All right, I'll talk to you later, because it doesn't seem natural for us. And we need to normalize talking about it and letting our children know why this is a factor. I have wonderful children who know my story, and they have been very, very supportive. And as I'm trying to get them healing now, I tell them, say what you need to say. I know that I did the best that I could, but I was not perfect. And I want you to be able to heal. Um, Ron did me probably the biggest thing he could ever do for me. He came to me one day and he said, Mom, we understand. We don't hold you accountable for any of that. You were struggling, you were trying, you did the best that you could. And I think that because I had that open line of communication with my children, um, hearing him say that was powerful, and it was very uplifting for me. So, we have to talk about the traumas. Even now, I still struggle with holding, hugging, kissing. It doesn't seem natural, but I do it and I'm working on it, you know. So
And why is that a trigger for you? The touching and the hugging and
I think it was part of the manipulation from my abuser. You know, telling me, "Oh, I love you," and then kissing me inappropriately or touching me places that I knew wasn't right. You know what I mean? So now here I am with children at a young age, hugging them. I'm like, "Whoa, this doesn't feel right to me." You know, I met my father. I always knew who my father was, but we didn't really have a relationship until after the abuse happened and Child Protective Services called him in and things. And the first thing he did when he saw us was he hugged us and he kissed me. And I was like, oh no, not again. Because I didn't know there was such thing as good and bad touch.
wow.
So in abuse, kids abuse if they don't um, get a grip on the reality of it. So I choose not to touch because I didn't want to be abusive. If that makes any sense, you know what I mean?
That felt abusive to you.
It did.
Gotcha. So how do you think that now affects your kids who are also now parents themselves?
I think my children are wonderful parents. I think if anything, it hurts them in their relationships. Um, as far as it being natural for them, they grew up on providing work. I worked 2 and 3 jobs their whole lives. You know, provide food on the table, roof over their heads, all the necessities. But the nurturing part was on the back burner. You know, my children are going to do a podcast with you soon on the effects of living with a parent who has suffered trauma. And I think that's going to be a great question for them.
Awesome. Awesome. So now, how long did you experience abuse
Okay,
as a
so
child?
it started when I was 9. Um, before the talks of sex, I had no idea uh, what it was not supposed to be, but I just knew even at that age that something wasn't right. And if you think about it, that was about third grade. I was about 9 years old, about second, third grade. Um, and my mother's reaction to it was explosive. It was an explosive anger, which in turn scared us tremendously to the fact that we didn't even want to tell anymore. I found out later on in my mother's life, though, after she passed, my mother was very open with her abuse because she was abused. This is generational. You know, we have a whole line of uh, sexual abuse, physical abuse in our families, period.
Wow.
After she died, I found out even more traumatic stuff, which made me understand her a little bit better, you know. So her reaction to it, because it was like deja vu to her. And her mother's reaction was way worse than her reaction. So I don't think she knew what to do with it when she heard it. One thing's for certain, two things for sure. She didn't leave. And as I got older, I didn't understand it then, but as I got older, it took me a long time to watch that T.D. Jakes movie, Woman Thou Art Loose, because it had the sexual abuse innuendo in it. He said something that made me have an aha moment. At the end, he said to the girl, he said, your mother didn't choose you over him. She did not choose him over you. She chose herself. And when they said that in that movie, I think my heart just was like, it was like a sigh of relief, like, whoa. Because all those years I said, how could you choose a man over your children? That's not what she did. She wanted happiness. She wanted love. And to her, that's what it looked like.
Yeah.
You know,
a safe place.
It was a safe place for her.
her.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, my mother and I, we had a on again, off again, estranged relationship. But as she got sick toward the ends of her life, I was her primary caregiver. And at first I was angry about the fact that why do I have to do this? You know, where were you, you know, for me? But everything happens for a reason. That year I spent with her, we were able to mend some fences and really talk about some things that we should have talked about, you know, and I got to see her in a different light, you know. So I'm glad that we had that. And when she left, I was okay. I was at peace because I did what I was supposed to do. You know, if we go back to the scripture, sometimes it says, honor thy mother and father. But it doesn't say honor them if they were good to you. It says honor them. So I knew that when I did that, I was going to be okay. That makes, you know.
So at that time, Did it open up to you?
She did. She opened up to a lot. Um, for example, I had a child, young. I was kicked out of the house with a baby, nowhere to go. I was homeless for a little bit. And she said to me, she says, I knew you weren't ready to go. And it still bothers me to this day that that even happened. I said, no, no, no. That's the one thing I don't want you to take with you and and feel bad about. Because what you did for me, it taught me, number one, always have my own. And two, never let somebody take it again. So that's one thing I can say. I've never been homeless, and I've always taken care of business because I wasn't gonna let that happen again. So things happen to us in life to make us realize not only how powerful we are in self, but things happen for a reason. For example, I remember when I finally got, I grew up in upper middle class neighborhood, and I ended up in the hood because of the actions that I chose, right? So it was a whole different world. But there is where I've learned survival. You talking about survival? I learned survival there. It was one day a girl was walking down the street and she had been abused and she was sad and depressed. And I went out there to help her. And she was like 13 years old. And she says, what do you want? You can't help me. You don't understand what I've been through. At that moment, I looked up, and it's so dramatic. I looked up at the sky and I said, I get it now. I had to go through the things in my life that I went through to be able to help somebody else. And it was that moment that I was okay with what had happened because I said, if me going through what I went through, the pain, the trauma, all the emotional and mental scars to help one person, two people, I'll take that then. Use me. So I talk about my life openly and honestly. And, there's never we shouldn't talk about that. No, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room because it needs to be discussed. So I've been a mentor to troubled teens ever since.
Definitely have.
I've studied trauma-informed care. This generation of children are hurt. They're hurt. And the only way that we're going to reach them is to deal with these roots. You might hear teachers say, I don't have time. I have to do this. But let me tell you this. You keep on cutting off those branches of that tree, it's going to keep growing back. You take time to nurture these roots, and you don't have that problem. So even though I might be behind my peers in a sense, because I'm still nurturing these roots, when these roots is done, we sprint to the finish line. And you have to keep going back. But me and my crew, we're off.
So you say the trauma started at about 9.
About 9 years old, yep.
How long did it go on?
Ooh, it went on until I left home.
Until I left, pregnant?
Until I was. I think that once it changed because once I had my first boyfriend, of course there was that fear that somebody would be able to tell. You know what I mean? So it kind of backed up. Then it became more of a physical abuse and a mental abuse. You're never going to be good for anything. You're only good for one thing anyway. Those are the words that geared my life. And those are the things that hurt me in relationships. I never had a good relationship with sex. It was always, I had to numb that part of me so that it wouldn't feel like abuse, if that makes sense. So I never really had a healthy relationship with it. I remember speaking at a prison. I was called to speak at a prison. I spoke to men who had sexually abused women, whether it was women or molestation or rape or whatever. And just the emotional abuse to me, emotional scars, was way worse than the actual physical, sexual part of it. So.
And how, you talk about sex and how it's affected you in relationships. We'll start with the sex part.
Okay.
And you had your first boyfriend at this time.
Mm-hmm.
You had your first sexual counter.
Mm-hmm.
How did that feel?
The first one. The first one was humorous. It was very, very extremely funny. I don't even count that one. If you're allowed to have one that don't count, that's the one that doesn't count, okay? Because I don't understand thinking back on it, how that was even allowed to be labeled as an encounter. So we skipped the first one to go to the second one. We skipped the first one to go to the second one. It was okay, but it wasn't enjoyable. I kept on saying, what is this explosive orgasm that everybody's talking about? Because I had no clue. But I think I had to make it not enjoyable, because if it was enjoyable, if it meant something, if it was as precious as everyone said, then that was stripped from me. And I didn't want to have to acknowledge that I didn't have that special effect because it was gone.
Would this be a fair statement to make that you equated sex with a negative behavior?
Most definitely. Gotcha. A negative behavior, it was an in the moment love thing. How some women equate sex with love. We both know that sex does not equal love at all. But for that moment, that 30 seconds or however long it chose to last, that was love. And afterwards, I remember always leaving feeling like just dirty. You know what I mean? Like, what was that? Like, it was nothing. It didn't mean anything, but I had to numb that part. Like I said, I had to numb that, because if I didn't numb that, I had to deal with it. You know what I mean? I wasn't ready to deal with it.
How did you know that feeling was a problem in your relationship? Was it because you would hear other people talking about it differently, or was it because your actual partner felt some type of way about your reaction to
it? I don't think they ever really knew, because I was the queen of faking it. Gotcha. Hooping and hollering and shaking and clenching and all that good stuff. So they didn't really even know. I don't think it was until I met my husband, who, was also abused as a child, and we got to talk about it. He was my best friend, and we got to sit down and say, hey, what did this mean? How did this make you feel? So those were the years that kind of saved me from a life that could have gone totally different. Having him tell me it's okay to be who you are. It's okay to feel the things that you're feeling. Let's talk about it. And that was the first time I think that I ever was able really to talk about everything without judgment. And you asked earlier about one of the most painful times in my life. And I think, him passing was very, very hard for me. This is why I tell people, make amends before you even go to sleep, because you never know what tomorrow may bring. So my husband and I had gotten into an argument over Ben and Jerry's ice cream, which to this day, I still won't eat Ben and Jerry's. And I didn't talk to him for 3 days, being angry, being mad at him. Well, he died on the 4th day. I was glad that morning we had gotten up and we had made up. And I kissed him goodbye. And when I kissed him goodbye, it was a twinkle in his eye. I'll never forget. It was so beautiful. And I realized now that it was the soul saying goodbye. I came home from work and I couldn't find him. By the time I found him, I worked on him. I did CPR, called the ambulance and everything, but I knew he was gone. I knew he was gone. I could just tell it. I could taste it. I could feel it that he was gone. It was then that my children saw a different me also. It was like Superwoman met her kryptonite. And I had stopped. I had had a child and she wasn't even a year old yet. So the other kids would go off to school and I'll be washing a wall. And they would come home and I would still be washing that wall, to the point where there was now a hole. The paint was gone. And I remember Damon coming, taking a rag from my hand. I don't even know if I fed the baby. I don't even know. I don't remember. But he died in 2006. So 2007 was a complete blur to me. And this is where he had always told my children, take care of your mother, no matter what. So it was Damon who stepped up and pretty much took care of me, took care of the family, was like, hey, this can't go on. In the meantime, he started getting in trouble with school. He was labeled. Damon was a fighter. If you know anything about Damon, he was always fighting. He was always angry. And what we need to understand as adults, especially teaching, Damon had taken on a role, as many children do, as the adult of the family. We cannot expect them to be the adult of the house, get the kids ready for school, help with dinner, while parents are working or whatever it is that they have to do. and be a child at school.
And then all of a sudden you got to be
all of a sudden you're a kid and they're saying, sit down, shut up, do what I say. You're like, hey, but I'm a grown man.
Right.
Watch how you talk to me. Mm-hmm. So we have to understand, and that's also part of the trauma-informed care. Because if the child has problems like that, or he is taking on different roles, we need to find a way to respect the role and get them to respect us as the adults. I understand that at home you are this, but this is what I need from you. Can you give it to me? It's a whole different language. We're not giving anything up by saying, I understand that. How can we work together? Because what's the end goal? Success of the child, right? It's not our pride or us having to be dominant over them. It's the success of the child.
Reach them where they are.
Exactly. Too many times we're up here and we want the child to meet us here. What's wrong with coming down here and bringing them up with us? Because at the end of the day, they're going to be stronger, wiser, and have more respect.
Yep.
More respect. And that's all it's about.
Yep. Don't get them where they are.
That's right. That's right.
Was your husband, was he sick?
He was.
This was coming?
Yes. Well, he had a bad heart. He had 3 heart attacks prior to the massive heart attack that killed him. And we were just in the hospital. He had just had his 3rd one, maybe 2 months prior. And I remember going home to take care of the kids really quickly and coming back to the hospital. When I got back to the hospital, he says, I'm ready to go. And the doctor's standing right there. And I'm like, what do you mean you're ready to go? You just had a heart attack. And mind you, this was the first time we were able to catheterize him because he refused up until this point. Well, he was unconscious. So I was able, as his wife, to give the consent. And doctor standing there, doctor never said a word. And so I said, okay, so we went home. And this is why I have a problem with HIPAA. The doctor knew he signed himself out against the medical advice and could not tell me because of HIPAA that that's what had happened. If I'd have known then, I would have asked different questions. But I was 32 years old. I didn't know. He's doctor standing right there. You said you can go home. When it's a bond like that of a marriage, I don't think that should have been the case. Because had they told me, he would have stayed there and had the surgery that he needed. So he was gone within 2 months. But he did know. He knew. He knew that. And when it's funny because when I found him, he was on the side of the house that nobody goes on. And he had laid himself down. He didn't fall. He had laid down. He was like this, covered up his head. So he had laid down. So he knew. Because he walked past his medication and everything to go on to the side of the house to die away from the kids because I was at work. So, yeah, he knew. He knew. And it's funny because we had all the conversations about death and what should we do if it happens. And I think that all couples need to have this talk, as hard as it is, because I knew what to do. In that very moment of trauma, I knew his wishes. I knew he was an organ donor. And that's a very hard thing to come to a family and say, hey, we need these. Can we have them? But once I had his consent and knew what he wanted, it was easier for me to say, yes, take what you need to take. I think the hardest thing for me that day was calling his mother. And I'll never forget that scream. It was just horrible. But that was traumatic. And that was traumatic for my children to see because now they saw this woman who was always go, 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 handling business. And I couldn't even feed myself. But they stuck together as a united force and they carried me that year. I can't even tell you what happened in 2007. But I know in 2008, my family was strong. And we were a bond and we were a force not to be reckoned with. So even though I saw myself as the leader, as a strong one thing about a leader doesn't create followers. A leader creates other leaders. And that's what each and every one of my children are, a leader.
Yes. How long were you married?
I was only married for 4 years, but we had been together for 10 years. So from about 23 to he died when I was like 32, great turn 33. So, and I was young. And I remember when I was finally able and I wanted help and I wanted support, looking for a widow support group. And I got to the support group and everybody there was so much older than me, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I said to one lady, and this is how they school you, and this is why I love older wisdom. I said, I need to start a support group for younger women. She said, baby, a widow is a widow. Doesn't matter how old you are. We all have the same emotions, the same feelings, and we support each other. And those ladies, I'm telling you, those ladies really helped me along. They helped it. So, in a lot of younger women today come to me when they become widows to see how you get through it one step at a time. And you have to allow yourself to feel what you feel. There's steps to it. Allow yourself to repeat a step if you have to repeat a step until you're okay. A lot of times we're there on a funeral beforehand, afterhand, but once after the funeral's over, everybody's gone. And people don't realize how much or how little support the person actually needs. Well, just ask. My mother was not a babysitting type of mother. She didn't watch the kids. After the funeral, she was gone. And I didn't know what to do. I was like, okay, now what? My husband's gone. I have all these kids. I had 5 children. What do I do? One step at a time. One step at a time. Not to mention Ron became my father, telling me what to do. And Damon, like, come on, go over here, do what you got to do. There's something else. But that's how we got through it. That's how we got through.
Do you think that your childhood bond your childhood trauma and the trauma of your husband's death crashed? Do you think they met at some point?
I think they did. By far, losing him the tragic way that I did was the worst pain I've ever felt in my entire life.
Even now?
Even now, because, when you're a widow, you're not married anymore. You're just not married anymore. So my anniversary never hurt me. It was, I lost my best friend. You know what I mean? He was the one who saved me from everything. And now I'm like, who's going to save me now? And that's when I started to do the work on myself. And it's funny because I started doing shadow work. I started to heal the little girl. And I come across this one pamphlet and it said, find a place in your childhood where you were happy and go back in your mind and go talk to the little girl. Well, it just so happened that the moment I chose to find was right before probably the worst abusive act ever happened. And I saw her and I went over and talked to her and I told her things are going to get rough, but you got this, and I hugged her and told her I loved her. And because I felt like the little girl was sabotaging everything in my life because I had never healed her. So she kept resurfacing. She was angry, all this anger. And it's funny because I was looking for a good book to read. And it's funny how things happen because nothing in life is a coincidence. And I came across Viola Davis's book. And in it, she says, stop trying to heal that little girl. Give her props because she made it. She was a survivor. Acknowledge her. Hey, you did great. We could take it from here. You can rest.
Wow.
And that just happened a couple of days ago. And that was like even more releasing for me. Because here I am trying to heal somebody who didn't need to be healed. Because she was a survivor. She did it. You know what I mean? So now my job as the me in my 50s, I ain't going to say 50 what, but in my 50s, is to continue on and build a life for my 80-year-old me to say, hey, you did that. You did that, right? But healing is necessary. Everybody's healing is going to look different because everybody's been through different things. And what we need to stop doing is judging the lives of others.
Absolutely.
I don't care what the person is into, what the person has done. They have to be held accountable for their actions. So why do we even care? Why are we in their business? I always say, I don't have any room to judge anybody, Tia, because I was this close to being that person. I could have very easily went to a life of drugs. Very easily. I could have very easily took some other turns. But I believe in my heart there was a purpose over my life. And once I realized what that purpose was, I've just been going and going and going in that purpose, living in my purpose. And it's amazing. But I think that there's still some people, they let you be a teacher. You know what I mean? Like, I remember you used to do this. But guess what? You can throw all the stones at that house you want to, baby, because I don't live there no more. You can't hurt me. You cannot throw my past in my face and think it is going to cause me harm because I no longer live there. I have made amends because the only person I need to be right for is myself. I don't need your approval. It's not needed.
I got that right.
So we need to stop living for other people because guess what? At the end of the day, they don't matter. They don't matter.
I made a podcast a couple weeks ago telling people,
stop
letting other people tell you how to live your life.
That's right.
They don't walk in your shoes.
They sure don't. And they probably couldn't walk a mile in them.
They don't have the same life experiences you have. How are you going to let them tell you when to walk?
Exactly.
When to run? They can't.
They can't.
And as hard as them decisions are, you got to make them yourself.
You have to
live your life.
You have to, because we have to be allowed to make our own mistakes, because that's how we learn life's lessons. And I had to stop doing that. I was always trying to shelter my children, like, don't do this because I did this already. This is what happened. Don't do that. You have to let them make their own mistakes because that's how they learn.
Absolutely.
Don't let them take their heads off, but you got to let them bump their heads a little bit.
Absolutely.
That stove is hot. You keep touching it, you're going to get burned.
Absolutely.
You get burned, okay, you don't touch the stove no more.
Yep.
So we can't shelter. We have to let them be held accountable for themselves. Exactly. They have to have natural consequences. And we need to stop taking away those natural consequences, because that's the key to survival, the consequences of your actions. Yep. And that's what's missing in schools too. There's no consequences. No consequences.
Yep. Everybody gets the same. If there are, everybody gets the same thing.
The same thing. And then you don't think that the other students are looking back and saying, hey, they got away with that.
All right.
I can try it again, but I'm going to perfect it this time. And then what you going to do?
Right.
You stuck with the same cycle when you not let nobody bump their heads. Let them touch that stove. They ain't going to touch it no more. Bottom line.
Did you ever go through a period of depression, suicidal thoughts, ideations, anything that nature?
Very depressed. I was very depressed. I had 3 suicide attempts. First one was probably at 10 years old.
That was close to when the abuse started.
Very close to it, because I was just, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I didn't know what to do. I just rather the pain stop. And it's funny because the last time that I had a suicide attempt, I had taken all these pills, and it happened to be my depression medication that I had taken. And my sister told, and they rushed me to the hospital. And I heard the doctors tell my mother, if she'd have taken one more pill, I would not have been able to save her. One more. And I had a whole half a bottle left. That was the last time I tried to kill myself, because I said, there's a purpose over my life. If it was one pill between me and death, right, and I had all those pills left, somebody was telling me, I got something for you.
This ain't gonna work.
It's not gonna work. Stop it, because it's not gonna happen. So my depression always came across as a lot of sadness, a lot of crying, a lot of beating myself up. And my children, they suffered from that. They saw a lot. They saw a lot of the sadness, a lot of the screams, a lot of the terrors, but we were always able to come back together as a family and talk about what had happened. We talked about mental health a lot, because mental health was also something that my family was generation after generation after generation. We had mental health issues. So I made them aware of them really early and what it looks like, and have always been in therapy and always encouraged them to go in therapy. I remember going into therapy as a child, and I wasn't supposed to say certain things. You can go in here, but when you go in here, don't say this, and don't tell them about that, and don't you dare bring up this. Well, how was I healing if I couldn't talk about these things?
Who set the therapy up?
My mother. Well, don't forget though, by then the courts were involved. Okay. So it was probably a court-ordered thing, in the beginning.
Gotcha.
But it was still, we knew what not to say and what to say.
Unbelievable.
Right. So now I tell my children, you say what you need to say to heal. Don't worry about my feelings. Don't worry. I want you to say what you need to say so that you can get the proper healing, so that you can go on and have a nice, happy, healthy life. Let me deal with why I chose to go that path. That's not for you to try to explain, like, well, my mom, she was a good mom and she didn't mean this. And no. Say what you need to say. Mm-hmm. That's not for you to try to say, well, she didn't mean this. Get your healing. Too many times we do that. And that's why I think that we don't seek help, because we don't want the people in our business. We don't want the system to get involved and start making decisions over our lives. So we don't go. And then what are you doing? Passing down generational trauma again because nobody's getting healed. Nobody's getting healed. And my nephew has that Contagious collection where he's talking about mental health awareness. And I'm so proud of him too because we got to talk about it. We got to heal. We have this time. It is time for us to heal because until we heal, we can't go forward and be the strength that this generation needs us to be.
And when you say talk about it, you mean talk about it openly as a family, as a community?
Everybody.
Talk to a therapist, a counselor.
Everybody, because it takes a village.
Gotcha.
And we can't do it by ourselves. As much as I try to mentor the troubled teens that I come in contact with, I always tell them, I can only take you so far. You need to talk to somebody else who can help you, who could be more beneficial to you. I'm just the icebreaker to get you to say, hey, I can talk about it. And it's okay to talk about. You got to start somewhere. I don't care where you start, just start. But you got to talk about it. And we have to allow them to talk about it. We got to allow it because guess what? We have our own natural consequences, whether we believe it or not. Yeah. So the actions that we do, the things that we do in life, we pay for them. Yeah. What goes around comes around. Yeah. And I don't believe that a lot of times people say, because I do a lot of spiritual things, and you get back what you put out. I don't believe that. Because if that was the case, as much love, understanding, and nurturing I give out, woo, I should have it back, right? But you know what I learned? You attract what you are. And because I am non-judgmental, I'm always willing to help, a lifter, a healer, I get those people that need to be healed. I get those people who have the trauma. You know what I mean? Who need that because that's what I put out. And I'm learning that maybe that's what they meant. You get back what you put out. Because I put out the vibe that I can help. So here comes everybody who needs that. You know what I mean? So it's just how it's up for interpretation, I guess, really on what you believe and how you feel. But that's what I've learned. I get those that need to be helped.
Love that. Love that. So now that you're an adult,
mm-hmm.
and would you say you're healed from your trauma? Would you say that?
I don't think I'll ever truly be healed from it. I think you learn to deal with it. You learn not to make it the forefront of your life. These things happen, and it made me who I am today. Without them, I wouldn't be this strong. I wouldn't have the knowledge that I am, that I have. I consider myself to be highly educated and equally street smart. That would not have happened had my path not looked like the way that it did. I am proud of myself now that I've learned to love me. Because if you don't love yourself, like what did Whitney Houston say? The greatest love comes from inside of you. And I never understood that until I got older. Because if you don't love you, nobody can love you. So my healing looks different now. My past will always be my past. It will always affect my future in some kind of way because of decisions that I choose to make from it. But it's no longer in control. I'm in control. So that's more what my healing looks like. I'm in control. I'm standing up and say, hey, you made these choices. You didn't have to, but you did. Face the consequences so you can move on. So it just looks different. It looks different when you're healed, I think. And I think we're always healing. We always have something to heal from. You're never truly healed, but you want to get to a point in your life when you can say, yeah, this is it. This is it right here. I don't care what anybody says. I'm me. I'm me. And they don't have the right to judge me or take anything from me because I fought long and hard to get here.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Now, at what point, because all of us on here that know Kesha.
Right, here we go.
Here we go. You can't leave here without this.
Right.
We know a chick loves sex now. So at what point?
Okay.
Did you start enjoying that part of your life?
When I got to be 40 in my 40s, I promised myself before my 40th birthday, you're not faking nothing else. If it comes, it comes. If it don't, you're going to let it listen. You ain't do it. You just didn't do it. But I also had to learn I was blocking it. So I had to work on my blocks in my mind too to be able to let go and to release. Let me tell you, the first time I was like, what?
I've been missing this.
This is what it's been about. Y'all didn't tell me about this, right? So then I was like, okay. You know what I'm saying? Now I was saying, why are you having sex if you're not getting satisfied? What are you doing it for? I didn't know what it was that I was missing. But now, you can't tell me nothing. You had to remove the blocks.
Because
it is a block.
To be uninhibited.
Yes. To be able to relax, not lay there like Celie when Mr. was older, just bouncing, and you like, when's it gonna be over? When's it gonna be over? You have to allow yourself to do. Look at Damon. You have to allow yourself. Right. Allow yourself to be free, to be relaxed, and to enjoy it because you deserve that. You deserve it. I deserve that. I'm happy. We need that in our lives, right? Because if not, then why? And I also learned that with it comes, you have to have affection for the person. You have to care about the person, have that genuine love for that person to be able to be yourself. You know what I'm saying? If you want to take your wig off, take your eyelashes off and the makeup, you should be able to do that to fully enjoy it. Not have to do it and hold your wig and, I want to see me like this. You have to be able to be with somebody who you can be yourself with. And I've learned that that is a key also. And Damon, for the record, I don't have a favorite child. Thank you.
Nice try.
Right.
Nice try now.
That's it.
All right. Any questions? Anything else you want to talk about?
Besides who my favorite child is?
Mm-hmm. Dog, we're going to get all the kids on here. Y'all going to have a rebuttal.
Yes.
Stream you in.
And it's funny because my children are hilarious. And I've always told them we need a reality show because listen, you can't get all my kids in one room and not expect to laugh because they turn everything into laughter. Laughter is the best medicine. It always has been for us. It's like, okay, mom's out there falling out, but it's okay. We got it because she going to be all right, and they found laughter in it. And that's how I think they got through. That's how they survived. And I'm so glad they have each other. I'm so glad that they're so close. And they just, I can't wait to see their podcast because I know they're going to be amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait. And if you don't know, Kesha talks to her kids about everything and anything.
Everything.
There's no secrets. And with her and her kids. And I love that about you.
Mm-hmm. You have to, because I grew up, I started my cycle at 9 years old. Right around that same time the abuse happened. I was hiding my panties because I didn't know what was going on. Nobody ever talked to me about it. So I said, I didn't want my children like that. You can talk about anything. Let's talk about it. To the point where sometimes people say, I wish I had the relationship you have with your children, because if you sit on some of our conversations, you'd be like, oh, you talked about that? Yes, we do. Bring it. We will talk about everything. Open communication is the key, definitely, because you don't want them to be ashamed, because guess what? If they're ashamed or they think you're going to get mad, they're going to go ask somebody else.
Right.
And that person's going to tell them the wrong thing.
Right.
I remember somebody telling me, after sex, jump up and down. You won't get pregnant. I'm steady jumping. Jump up and down.
I never heard that one, kid.
Listen. Or the bathtub because it's swimming the other way. Listen. Let me tell my kids what I want them, the truth.
The mom, don't throw it like that.
What do you say?
He got a question, and Mary said open communication is key.
That's right. What did it say? How did the trauma transition with age? How did it age? Is that what it says?
Mm-hmm.
How did it age? The trauma transition, I think one thing that really helped me was that time in my life when I realized what my purpose was, and that I accepted the fact that I needed to go through the things that I needed to go through in order to be where I'm at to help other people. I think it was a huge setback for me when my husband died, because then I lost focus and I had to regroup. So I was down for a while, but then it was after that, I don't think it is any pain greater. Well, I won't say that, as God knows I don't want nothing else, but that was a great trauma in my life, but I had to go on. I had to make him proud and finish what we had started. So that's what I did. So I think as you age, and let's face it, once you get to be a certain age, you no longer care who says what about you. If I want to wear my muumuu with my Crocs, let my kids talk about my Crocs. Listen, that's what I'm going to wear. You know what I'm saying? So I think as you age, it looks a little bit different. Trauma looks different.
Anything else, guys?
It is definitely, I put on my page today, let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's time. It's time to talk about the elephant in the room because we're hurting. We're hurting. And it is unnecessary hurt because you can heal. This is something that you can heal from. So let's start. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's not internalize it because I've learned that people reflect more what's about them than what is about you. So if somebody's saying something negatively, don't take it to heart. It's just something that they need to say because it's bothering them. It's affecting them. I was always like, oh my God, they say this. How's it going to make me look?
Right.
It's going to make me look like I have children who need help. And that's okay because we all do. No judgment here.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
People just need to start talking.
That's right. Start talking. Start today. Let's talk about it. No judgment. Let's talk about it. And parents, we need to have that straight face. We need to not judge and listen. Listen with the intent to hear and understand what's being said, not to respond. Because sometimes they don't need the response. They need us to listen with a genuine heart because their feelings matter. Their feelings matter. What's it say?
See what Mark wrote?
Oh, no, I can just see the moms. What did Mark say?
Thank you for normalizing difficult conversations, trauma,
yes,
and therapy for our community.
Most definitely.
That's what's up, Mark.
Most definitely. And I love it.
Says, as someone who studied you for 30 years, I feel like watching your growth, you became the help you needed as an adolescent.
Very true. Somebody asked me once, why did I become a teacher? I became a teacher because I wanted to be the person that wasn't there for me. The person that I needed to be there, I wanted to be that person. I was a great student. I had A's, B's. A B was like, whoa, but my grades started to drop and nobody noticed. I became a problem in school and nobody noticed. If they did, they were afraid to say something. Had somebody said something then and helped me then maybe I would have gotten help sooner.
This is a question, because I'm around a lot of kids, been around a lot of kids for the last, 22 years.
Right.
I often wonder sometimes kids that go through the same kind of trauma that you were going through, and you go to school, and it's kind of like a safe place because it gets you away from the trauma. But then nobody recognizes the trauma.
Right.
Did you ever feel like let down because all the adults around you were missing the mark?
And I don't know now that I'm older, looking at and going through it myself, I don't know that they missed the mark or they didn't want to talk about it.
But they knew
what was going on. Oh, most definitely. Because you figure, you might not remember, Tia, but I had children and youth came to the school once a week to talk to me. And they pulled me out. And I know people knew who this woman was coming to pull me into a private room to discuss some things. And the school never said, and let's talk about that too. And even though I know children and youth is overwhelmed and stuff like that, they dropped the ball. They dropped the ball because where they should have taken me out of the house, they left me there. And it's funny because I just saw my counselor, my children and youth worker. I just saw her maybe a few months ago. And she's like, hey, you look great. And what I wanted to say to her was, why didn't you take me out of that house? But at that point, I think I was healed enough that I didn't need the answer. Because sometimes knowing the answer is not what's important. But she should have taken me out that house.
I feel like they dropped the ball a lot.
They dropped the ball a lot. And is it overwhelming or is it they don't care or is it they don't know what to do? Regardless of what it is, say that. Say that. Because when you've been through it, like I've been through it, I can recognize it with my children and my students. And I hate the fact that when they come to you and want to talk, you have to say, if you tell me somebody's hurting you, you're hurting somebody, or you're going to hurt yourself, I have to tell. Yeah. That stops them from telling what they really need to say. Right. And I don't know how we can fix that in the system some kind of way, because obviously they feel safe enough to me to say, hey, I want to talk. Yep. And I always let them know if they tell me something, I can't keep this. I have to tell this. But I'm going to tell you before I do it because I never want to lose your trust. Because once you lose a child's trust,
that's it.
That's it.
Right.
You can't get it back.
Right.
So we got to do better. We got to do better. And it's not saying that what you're doing now isn't, you did what you know. When you know better, you do better. Yeah. So now that we know better, let's do better. Let's do better.
Mark says, we often say to ourselves quietly, I wish I had. Thank you for becoming all that you wished you had for others and yourself. Blessed to be a blessing.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's what's up, Mark.
Thank you so much. And it makes what I've gone through so much better when I can help somebody else and be a blessing to somebody else. You know, my trauma was not in vain. My pain was not in vain. I did what I needed to do to be able to help others, and I'm okay with that.
If you had one piece of advice to give, what would that be?
I think that it would be, first, communication is key. You know, and like I said before, listen with the intent to hear and understand and not to respond. Stop judging others. Everybody has to be held accountable for what they do. You know,
we all got shit.
We all got something. And guess what? You know, and I'm not saying anything bad about religious people. They always want to say, the Bible says this, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. But the Bible also, show me in the Bible where it says one sin is greater than the other, besides blasphemy. We all, listen, if you then slept with your brother's sister, your brother's wife, and he over here messing with him, guess what? Both of y'all in the wrong. So who's to say? You can't pass judgment on this person like he with who has no sins cast the first stone, and okay, none of us stole nothing. Stop doing that to everybody. It's none of our business. Mind your own business about other people's lives, what we think is doing something wrong, because there's other things that we could be focusing on. And once we focus on the right things as a community, we will see our strength in numbers. They divided us for a reason. That's a different podcast. Yes, but ma'am. The strength in numbers, stay together and build each other up. Stop tearing each other down.
I do want to have that podcast. I want
Most
to have
definitely
a panel podcast of just talking about Black history, Black issues.
Most definitely.
Just things like
Most
that.
Most definitely. And another thing I want to remind people too about this situation is women, and especially with traumatic experiences like this, there was a time in history when women had no rights. None. It was not illegal for a husband to rape his wife. It was not even heard of. There was no such thing as rape. She was property. And, you know, and I teach history. So when I say slaves were seen as less than cattle, you got the dogs and the pigs and the horses up here. Then you got the slaves here. Women didn't get the right to vote till 90 years after the slaves. 90 years. Wow. So, you know, we are still evolving as women's rights and the abuse. And I think that's one of the reasons why nobody talks about it as much too, because they don't see women as equals. They don't see us as people. You know, but like you said, that's a whole different podcast and we need to get into, but 90 years. So women were never there. And rape has always been swept under the rug. Prostitution is the oldest profession in the book, you know, but nobody said anything about that. Certain things you got to talk about. Elephant in the room. Let's talk about it.
Mary says your family, friends, and students are so fortunate to have someone like you.
Oh, thank you very much. I do my best. I do my best.
All right, guys, we're coming up on an hour. We're going to go ahead and end this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for joining. Kesha, Davis, Coleman.
Thanks, guys.
Live on the scene. I thank you so much for your life, your words of encouragement. All right, we're out, guys.